This is the Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe Summit, and it is the plug-in hybrid version of the Grand Cherokee, and it's also the third Grand Cherokee that I've owned. The first one that I owned was a 1997 model, and it was hands down, by far, the worst automobile I have ever owned in my life. Matter of fact, I have nothing good to say about that car other than the fact that the seats were comfortable. Now, the second one that I owned, and it's the one that I traded in for this one here, was a 2014 Overland. And oddly enough, that one was the best car that I've ever owned. Now, it'll be years before I really know where the 4xe falls in that spectrum. But after putting several thousand miles on this guy, I can safely say that Jeep has really done a fantastic job with this car. And so far, I'm absolutely loving it. Now, I have to admit that when Jeep first unveiled the new Grand Cherokee L a couple of years ago, I was not a big fan of the styling redesign. Matter of fact, my very first impression was, oh my God, Jeep just created a giant Ford Flex. And I think that the reason for this is that I had just simply expected Jeep to do what the rest of the automotive industry had been doing for the last 10 years, which was to design their SUVs to be, sleeker and more sporty, whereas Jeep went more boxy. So this kind of just threw me off at first. Now, that being said, the design did grow on me, and I actually do like the way the car looks. And it's because Jeep did a pretty good job of all the little details in the design. For example, up front, the nice thin headlights, I like the look of that. There's lots of really nice chrome accents on the front, chrome accents on the side, on the mirrors, up on the roof rails, the doors, the handles, down below. I mean, it overall just is a nice looking luxury SUV. And I like what Jeep did with the back of it as well. The interior of the Grand Cherokee is absolutely stunning. Jeep did an absolutely amazing job with this interior. I mean, the entire dashboard looks fantastic. The seats look fantastic. Even the doors look fantastic in this car. Here we've got a touchscreen and physical buttons. And I'm so happy that Jeep designed this the way they did, because so many cars either have just ridiculously large screens or they have what I call floating iPads on a stick. Just looks like an iPad mounted onto the dashboard. But Jeep did it right, because they've got this nice 10.3-inch screen, which is the proper size for a screen. It is actually integrated into the design here, and they've left us with a whole lot of physical buttons. So we've got physical buttons for the air conditioning controls and the seats, the seat heater, the seat cooling. We've got radio controls, and of course down here we have all the various off-road type controls. In this little compartment here, we do have a wireless charging pad, which works really, really well. You just throw your phone in there and a blue light comes on to indicate that it's charging. We have both USB-A and USB-C plugs, which is fantastic. We also have a 12-volt plug for things like radar detectors and other gizmos like that. Now, one complaint that a lot of people have had about this little center stack area is the gratuitous use of piano black. Piano black is this, shiny black plasticky material. And by the way, this one almost never wants to actually close. Nope. One of these days I'll get that looked into. But anyway, the piano black, while it kind of goes with the whole theme here, it just isn't a durable material. It scratches so easily and you get fingerprints all over it. Now, a lot of people complain about this, but for me, it's not as big of a deal because I always leave these things open anyway. I've always got this open because I've got my phone in there charging, and I've always got this one open because I've just like to store stuff in the cup holders. There is still a little bit of piano black exposed, which I have to be careful with. But so for me, it's not as big of a deal, but numerous people have complained about this, and I do think Jeep probably could have chosen a better material to use down here. Now, there are a couple of buttons I wish that they had done differently in here. I'm glad we have physical buttons, but if I'm going to be picky, there are 3 buttons located way over here by the headlight controls, and they're actually pretty important buttons because these are the buttons that control which hybrid mode you want to be in. There's a mode for regular hybrid mode, electric mode, and e-save mode. I switch between these modes fairly often, and I imagine a lot of people do, so I'm not sure why they were put down here, which I consider to be the lowest cost real estate in the car. Those 3 buttons probably should have been put somewhere a little more easily accessible because you can't even see them. The steering wheel is in the way, so it's very difficult to switch modes when you want to. Another button that I wish was a little bit different is this one right here. So the car does have parking assist. And the parking assist does work. I've tried it out. It will automatically turn the steering wheel and do whatever to park the car for you. But here's the thing. If the surround camera, the parking sensors, and all the tech in this car aren't good enough for you to be able to back it in yourself, then you probably shouldn't be driving in the first place. The park assist works, but it's slow. I can park this car myself easily, at least 4 times faster than using the park assist. So I never ever use it, and I can't imagine I ever would use it, and nobody should use it. So I wish that that button was, instead of being park assist, I wish it was a hard button to bring up the surround camera. Because when I'm parking the car myself, sometimes I want the camera on because it's maybe a tight spot, or I can't see, how far away the curb is or something like that. And there's no physical button to do that. So I do wish that they had swapped that out there. Now, that being said, you can configure shortcuts in the infotainment system to do this. So I have put a custom button up in the menu bar here where I can just press that button and it brings up the surround camera. Or if you're on your home screen here, you can custom configure a whole bunch of stuff in the UConnect 5 system. And one of the things I've configured is a shortcut, once again, for the surround camera. So that's how I get to it. But nevertheless, I do wish that there was a physical button, because that would be just a whole lot faster to get to. There is one option that this car doesn't have. It's an option that I originally ordered, but due to a whole series of unfortunate events, I didn't end up getting it, and that is the passenger screen. And it is an expensive option, and quite frankly, it's a gimmick. And I'm kind of glad I didn't get it, because I think that this area looks better without it. The passenger screen, had I had it, all it lets you do, well, it lets the passenger look things up on the nav system and send, a route over to the main nav system. It has its own Bluetooth connection for doing some audio stuff, and you can watch movies on it. But honestly, for the price, it just doesn't make any sense. It's really a very gimmicky thing, because most of what it does, you could just do on your phone anyway. So I don't have that, but what I do have as part of one of the other tech upgrade packages is the digital rear view mirror. This is another feature I don't actually use though. So here's the thing about the digital rear view mirror. You flip this like this, and then the mirror goes from being a regular mirror to this digital display. And in concept, this is a good thing, because it gives you a wider field of view than you could normally see, if you were just looking through a regular mirror. And there's also no, C-pillars in the way. There's no pillars, there's nothing in the way blocking your view. So you get a nice, clear, wide view of what's behind you. But there are 2 problems. Problem number 1 is that this is a 2-dimensional display, and there's absolutely no depth perception. So if you're driving along and you're in traffic and there's cars coming up beside you and behind you, you get no sense of distance, depth, or speed when you're looking in the digital mirror. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is that if you're over 40 like me and your eyes just don't focus as quickly as they used to, driving down the road with your eyes focused on infinity and then suddenly having to look at this, where your eyes are now focused 1.5 feet away, that can be kind of jarring. With a normal mirror, you're focused at infinity, you look in the mirror, you're still focused at infinity for everything behind you. But with this, you're changing a drastic focus from far to near, and my eyes just can't handle it. I found myself going cross-eyed whenever I tried using this feature. So I actually don't use it. Probably my least favorite part of the interior is going to be the dashboard. So the dashboard in this car is a bit of a cluttered mess. There is a ton of information that gets displayed on here, and you can customize this thing quite a bit. Now that's the good side. The good part is that, yes, I can kind of show what I want to show, and I can set up things the way I want it set up. But the problem is it just doesn't look very good, because the whole dashboard is really just a jumbled mess of different font colors, different font sizes, and there's just not a lot of differentiation between, what's where. So for example, in the upper left corner, I've got my external temperature being displayed. For some unknown reason, the temperature is being displayed in the second largest font on the screen. The speed is the largest font, as it should be, but why is the temperature the second largest font? Because in the bottom right corner, we've got far more useful information that I need to know, like, for example, the air suspension height. So right now it says entry exit because it's at the lowest setting. The font that says entry exit is so incredibly small that it's actually breaching the limit of what this display's resolution can show. It's really hard to read that. And when I'm doing things like off-roading and I've got Off-Road 1 and Off-Road 2 selected, the font is so small, I have a hard time telling whether it says Off-Road 1 or Off-Road 2 because it's this tiny little micro text. If you have the tech package upgrade in this car like I do here, then you're going to have the night vision camera. This is an actual thermal vision camera that will automatically activate at night. Now, it doesn't automatically show you the thermal vision on the screen. You actually have to go into the menu and select it if you want to see it. But at night, it's always actually operating in the background. And what it does is it's looking for people and animals. And if it detects, say, a deer on the side of the road, it will put a yellow box around that deer and it'll warn you. If the deer or the person is in the middle of the road, then it puts a red box around the thing and it warns you a lot more. It says, warning, there's something in front of you. And it works really, really well because there's a lot of deer out here where we are. And at night, this thing has spotted deer that I could not see with my own eyes. So super, super useful feature. Another option that you get with the tech upgrade is the heads-up display. The heads-up display is great. So you can't see it from anywhere but the driver's seat. But there's a little display in front of me here, and it reflects on the windshield a display of information that is kind of critical, like your speed. And well, basically you can configure this thing to show you as little or as much information as you want. I like the heads-up display a lot. The only problem with the heads-up display is that if you are wearing polarized sunglasses, it doesn't work. It actually goes blank. You can barely see it at all. And that's because, well, the polarized sunglasses are doing their job. They're eliminating the glare, right? That's what the heads-up display is. It's a reflection off of that display. So the heads-up display really only works properly on cloudy days like today or at night. Earlier, I said that the only thing nice that I had to say about my 1997 Grand Cherokee was that the seats were very comfortable. And that's true. Those seats were great. They were really plush. When I got my 2014 Grand Cherokee Overland, the seats were noticeably firmer, but they were still really, really comfortable. We actually do a lot of cross-country road trips every year. I'm talking, 12, 14-hour driving days. And we never had a problem with comfort in the 2014 Grand Cherokee. In this car, however, I'm not sure how it's going to go because these seats are definitely firmer than the 2014. Quite a bit firmer, really. The good news, however, is that we have controls to do more adjustments than we've ever had before. We can adjust the side bolsters. I can adjust kind of the leg knee supports. We've got the lumbar support, of course. But I also have back massagers. Those are great, right? But they're not like real sharper image massage seats or anything like that. You can't expect a full-on workout from these things. It's actually a pretty subtle deal. You press the button over here to activate it, brings up some options. You've got high, medium, low, and you can also choose, from all these different options of what kind of massage you want. Frankly, I don't know why anybody would choose anything other than high, because high isn't that high. Anything less and you're just not going to feel it. As a matter of fact, if you have a jacket on, you really don't feel anything. You've got to be wearing as thin of a shirt as possible. The rear seat of the Jeep Grand Cherokee is a really nice place to be. It is so roomy and it just feels really open and airy back here. For starters, the seats feel like they're raised higher than the front seats. I feel like I'm higher up, and I don't know if that is the same in the gas-powered version of this car or if it's just specific to the 4xe, but the 17 kilowatt hour batteries are located under these seats, so it is possible that they've raised them a bit. But either way, I like the view. It's a full panoramic view of this beautiful interior with the same quilted, stitched leather seats, the same wood and chrome accents. It's really just a beautiful view. There's glass that just seems to wrap all the way around the car, and you've got this gigantic glass sunroof that goes all the way from the back to the front. Also, the seats will obviously fold flat so that you can make more room for all the cargo in the back. And just like up front, we have both USB-A and USB-C plugs. They've also given us back here a 110, or actually they're calling it a 115 plug. I guess that's in case you want to run a blender or something to make some margaritas, I suppose. You have independent air conditioning controls as well. So both the passenger side and the driver's side can control their temperature and their seat warmers as well. And another upgrade feature is this, peasant blockers. So the weird thing about the peasant blockers is that they're part of the same tech package as the wireless charging pad up front. I don't know why Jeep considers this to be tech, but it is part of a tech package. And so there you go. The rear cargo storage area here is a little bit different than it was in the previous generation of Grand Cherokee. I should point one thing out, however. I have installed a canvas back cargo liner back here to protect all the carpeting because our dogs shed like crazy. Underneath here is actual really nice Berber carpet. It's actually a very nicely outfitted rear cargo area. But I have this liner, and what Jeep has done here is they have actually widened this space compared to the previous generation. It's a few inches wider, so the dogs are a little bit happier. They have more room. The sacrifice, however, for having more space is the fact that they removed the little side storage unit that was over here. There was a little bin where you could put things like the dog leashes and some other stuff. So unfortunately, there's nowhere back here to put anything, so I just have to have the dog leashes just laying about. Also, underneath the floorboard here, we have a lot less storage space than we used to have in the previous generation of Grand Cherokee. In my other car, in my 2014, I had tons of stuff back here along with the spare tire. I had my emergency air compressor, I had jumper cables, I had bungee cords, I had parts for the trailer hitch, and all sorts of stuff packed back here. On this one, however, I've got next to nothing. As a matter of fact, I couldn't even get my tire compressor to fit anywhere back here. I had to remove, there's normally a plastic cowling that goes here. I had to actually remove that plastic cowling in order to wedge this in there. Now it does come with a level 1 charger right here. I could remove this and free up a little bit more space here, but it's really not a whole lot. So unfortunately, you know, that is kind of the trade-off. We have less place to put things back here than we used to. And the other bummer is that the car does not come standard with the retractable cargo cover. Every SUV should come with that because there's no trunk, there's no way to hide anything that's back here. So unfortunately, you have to go to Mopar and pay several $100s more to get that retractable cargo cover. And frankly, for a car that costs almost $80,000, I think that's a bit ridiculous. I think at least the Summit and the Summit Reserve trims should have come standard with that retractable cover. But otherwise, the dogs are happy. They like all the extra space back here. I could do an hour-long video just on the UConnect 5 infotainment system in this car. But don't worry, I'm not going to put you through that, but I do want to go through a few of the key things to know about it. For starters, I had UConnect in my previous Jeep, and for that generation of automobile, I thought that was the best infotainment system available at the time. UConnect 5 is very similar to the older UConnect, but it is significantly more complicated and significantly more powerful. It's actually a really, really good system. It's very similar to the old system, but just way more stuff going on. And what I like about UConnect is that they've tried very hard to make sure that you can get to where you want to be with the fewest number of button presses possible. A lot of other infotainment systems make you go through incredibly complicated menus to get to where you want to be. And that's not good when you're driving. You don't want to be that distracted. With UConnect, it's rarely more than 1 or 2 button presses to do what you want to do. So first of all, if we look at the apps, we can see there are a bajillion things that you can do. I'm not going to go through all these, and all these have little subsections with their own, giant lists of things. But if you go to your homepage, what's great is that you can customize this however you want. This whole layout is customizable. As a matter of fact, I can swipe and go to another page that I've customized. I can swipe the other direction, go back to this page. I've set this up the way I want, and you can do this by just pressing. I'm not going to go through the whole thing in detail, but you go to this My Pages thing. You can add a page, delete a page, reorder pages, and so on. I mentioned this before that I added a shortcut for the surround camera, so I can just hit that, and it will quickly take me to the surround camera. One of the cool little shortcuts I like to use when I'm just driving and I don't want any distractions is this. It's the Macintosh analog decibel meter, and it's awesome. I absolutely love this. It doesn't serve any real purpose other than it's just cool to have an analog readout. And also at the top, we have a configurable menu bar. I showed this a little bit before as well, but if you swipe down, here's where you have a bunch of options that you can drag into the different positions on the menu bar. And like I say, I added a shortcut for the surround camera because I use that quite a bit. So it's highly customizable, and another awesome part of this is that it has wireless CarPlay. So wireless CarPlay works surprisingly well. I didn't know that it would because I've heard bad things about wireless CarPlay from other people in other cars. But for me and my iPhone, every time I get into the car, I turn it on, it connects to CarPlay within a few seconds. It's very, very fast. And then I'm ready to go. And once I'm in here, I've got access to my Waze and Amazon Music and a whole bunch of other things. This is super, super useful. Also, phone calls are the clearest phone calls I have ever heard in a car. I mean, it's shockingly clear how good it sounds with this Macintosh audio system. And it doesn't just sound good on my end, the receiving end of the phone call. People on the other end, they don't even realize I'm driving in a car because it's that clear. We've got multiple microphones everywhere in here. And also the fact that I'm usually driving in electric mode, it's so quiet that oftentimes I'll tell people, they'll ask me, what I'm doing. I say, well, I'm driving home. And they're like, you're in your car? I'm like, yeah, I'm in the car. They can't tell. Macintosh sound system overall sounds really, really good. You do have to kind of crank it up a bit to get the full dynamic experience out of it, but it does sound good. And of course, we've got satellite radio, and you can plug in a USB device, and there's a million different ways to play audio on this. So that's the quick intro to the UConnect 5 system here. It's an extremely good infotainment system, and there is so much other tech packed in here that I wish I could go into, but like I say, it would take me an hour to go through everything. It does a lot. All right, so now let's talk about what really matters, and that is how this car drives. And by the way, this car drives great. I don't want to get into all the little details, the mumbo jumbo technical stuff. None of that really matters. All that actually matters is this a good car to drive? And yes, it is. We've got the electric motors, the gas engine, and it combines for 375 horsepower. But we also get 470 pound-feet of torque. That is very impressive. Matter of fact, that's considerably more than you get in the V8 version of the Grand Cherokee. And Jeep claims that the 0 to 60 time in this is about 6 seconds. That's almost a full second faster than the V8 version. Now, the power and the torque really do make a big difference. I mean, when you are off the line in this thing, your head goes back into the seat. And when you're just driving at pretty much any speed, that instant torque from the electric motors really makes a difference. You can feel it, and it drives so much differently than a regular gas-powered Grand Cherokee. I like the power. I like the way it's delivered. It's generally a smooth hybrid system. So when you are in hybrid mode and you're cruising along, it will intelligently blend the gas engine and the electric motors together. And usually it's a very, very smooth transition. You usually don't even notice it. On the rare occasions where you do notice it, for me, it's been pretty subtle. It really just kind of feels like a gear change. So it's not a big deal, but it is something that feels a little bit different than a regular gas engine. But overall, driving this thing in hybrid mode is really the best way to drive it, because that's where you have the instant access to all of that torque and horsepower. And it's just very reactive. It's just, you can pass a car so much more easily in this than you can in the old V8 version. Now, that all being said, when I'm driving around town, I am almost always in electric only mode. And that's because I just like the silence. I love how incredibly quiet it is. And I love the fact that I'm not using a single drop of gas. Now, the only thing about electric mode is that since you're running only on the electric motors, you have far less horsepower. But it's a very torquey amount of horsepower, so getting from 0 to, say, 35 or 45 miles an hour is actually quite peppy. It does that really well. But getting up to highway speeds, that can take a while. 0 to 60 in electric mode takes, I don't know how long, but let's just say it ain't quick. Now, the good thing is if you just mash your foot down, you push the accelerator pedal all the way down, well, then the car knows you want power, and it'll kick in that gas engine to give you that extra boost. Electric mode is the mode I use most of the time, and I am generally getting about 25, 26 miles of range out of it. That's pretty good because that gets me to about 90% of the places that I need to go on a daily basis. That gets me to the mall and back, that gets me to the grocery store and back, that gets me to lunch, gets me to pretty much everywhere that I need to be. Also, it only takes about maybe 2 hours and 20 minutes to completely recharge a depleted battery in this thing. That means that if I run an errand, I go home, I plug it back in, and in no time, I'm ready to go again. The only thing that I don't much care for about the drivetrain in this car is the 4-cylinder gas engine. It's mechanically a perfectly good engine. It actually has a reasonable amount of horsepower for what it is. The problem that I have with it is the sound that it makes, and it's just not that pleasant. The suspension in this new generation of Grand Cherokee is definitely a little bit different than it was in the previous generation, and I mean that in a good way. The suspension is noticeably stiffer, and that just means that the handling has improved. On curvy roads like I'm on right now, it handles way better than my last Grand Cherokee. It really just feels tighter, and you can also set what kind of steering you want in this car. So there's a setting page in the UConnect system where you can choose if you want the steering to be in sport mode, normal mode, or comfort mode. Now I'm going to talk more about the suspension later when we go off-roading, but suffice to say, I'm very pleased with how it does on curvy roads like this and just driving in general. The 4xe also has a very good regenerative braking system. Now I don't want to, once again go into all the technical details of what regenerative braking is and how it works in this car, but suffice to say it's nice and strong. And as a result, I would estimate that 95% of the braking or the deceleration that I do is done by the regenerative braking system, not the actual physical disc brakes. Pretty much the only time the physical discs actually have to engage in this car is when I am coming to a complete stop. When I am stopped at a stoplight or something, then the actual brakes are engaged. But just slowing down, coming up on a stoplight, it's almost always the regenerative braking system. Now they do have one pedal driving in this car, and that's activated with this button here. This is the Max Regen button. Max Regen is a little bit of a misnomer because it has nothing to do with maximum or minimum or more or less. It gives you the exact same amount of regenerative capabilities as just hitting the brake pedal yourself. But it's nice that with one pedal driving, all you have to do is just let up off of the accelerator pedal and the regen system kicks in automatically to bring you to a halt. Or not to a halt actually, it won't bring you completely to a stop in this car. It'll slow you down to about, maybe 10 to 5 miles an hour. And then at that point, you do have to hit the actual brake pedal. So let's talk about fuel economy. Now, my previous Jeep Grand Cherokee only got about 14 miles to the gallon in city driving. That's horrifically bad. This car, however, I'm getting about 25 miles to the gallon on average. And I'm talking about being in hybrid mode with a battery with 0 miles of electric range left. I'm talking about when the gas engine is doing all the work. That's a huge, huge improvement. Unfortunately, highway driving is not such a big improvement. My old car versus this car is only about a 1 mile per gallon difference. I get very consistently 21 mpg on the highway at speeds of around 70 to 80 miles an hour. That's not that good, but you know what? It's still at least a 5% improvement over the old car. So an improvement is an improvement. And on top of that, I still have all the extra power that this system provides. So it's kind of a win-win in that regard. Electric mode is really the mode you want to be in if you're trying to be energy efficient. And it's also a bit cost efficient as well. It only cost me $1.30 to fully charge this battery. And like I say, that gets me up to 26 miles of range. The same 26 miles in my old Grand Cherokee with the V8 engine would have cost about $5 in unleaded, regular unleaded gas. And by the way, this car also runs on regular unleaded. You don't have to put any expensive premium in this thing, just 87 octane or better. But anyway, there's a significant price difference. It really comes down to about 5 cents per mile versus almost 19 cents per mile. It's a big savings, and that adds up over time. However, the 4xe version of the Grand Cherokee costs a lot more than the gas-powered version, so it may take a long time to make up that price difference. This new generation of Grand Cherokee also has a very improved adaptive cruise control system. Now it has two modes. There is kind of the traditional adaptive cruise control where it just follows the car in front of you, right? The only improvement to that versus the old generation of cars is now it will bring you to a complete stop. Previously, it only brought you down to, I think, 15 miles an hour before it would disengage, but now it will completely stop the car. That's great. But the second mode, and it's the mode that I really like, is the mode that also includes active lane management. That's the mode where the car steers for you. Now you activate that by pressing the little steering wheel icon on the steering wheel here. That will put you into the correct mode. You set the adaptive cruise control just like normal, press the set button, and at this point, you can just take your hands off the steering wheel because it's doing the steering for you. Unfortunately though, it gets angry when you do this. It wants you to keep your hands on the wheel, and that's because this is not hands-free driving. It'll let you go hands-free for a pretty good while actually, 15 seconds maybe a little bit longer even. But you do eventually have to put your hands back on. One of the many reasons why I chose to get another Jeep was that I needed a vehicle that was seriously off-road capable. I needed something with high clearance, I needed something with air suspension and all the other off-road gizmos in between. And the reason is well, this right here. This is the Sandy Ranch, and this is my ranch out in the Texas Hill Country. And if the terrain looks a little bit familiar to you, it's because just down the road is where Jeep had their official press event for the Grand Cherokee 4xe back in April of 2022. We have the same granite hills, same granite gravel, and basically the same kind of terrain. When I bought this place, I had a Lexus GX 470, and that was a spectacularly good off-road vehicle, believe it or not. It didn't have the clearance that the Jeep does, but it had an amazing suspension. The suspension on that thing was like driving on a cloud up this hill. I could go off-roading, and I just enjoyed it because it was so smooth. Overall, just like with street driving, this thing does drive better off on this trail than my Overland did. Not as good as the Lexus. Nothing I have ever driven up this path has ever been close to as good as the Lexus. But here's the good and the bad news about that. The good news was, well, it was smooth, I could drive fast, I enjoyed it, I didn't have to go see a chiropractor every time I came off of this trail. The bad news is because it was so smooth, I was encouraged to drive fast all the time, and as a result, I popped a lot of tires on this trail. I made a lot of trips back to Discount Tire, and I got that tire warranty every time over there. In the 9.5 years that I had my Overland, I never once popped a tire because the ride was so bumpy that I was forced to go super slow. Now, one of the things that is better about this Jeep versus the Overland is the fact that they fixed the suspension so that when you are in Off-Road 2, which is the highest setting, it doesn't bang anymore. So what happened was in the Overland, in my 2014 Overland, when you're in Off-Road 2 and you were doing this kind of off-roading, the suspension banged really, really hard. I mean, it kind of felt like it was just bottoming out. It was a really unpleasant experience. If you put the car back into Off-Road 1, which is a little lower, it wouldn't bang, but you didn't have the clearance, so I was constantly switching between Off-Road 1 and Off-Road 2, depending on what kind of clearance I needed. It was really annoying. They fixed that in the new generation of Grand Cherokee. Now I'm in Off-Road 2, there's no banging. It's actually quite smooth. It absorbs all of the big bumps a lot better than my old 2014 did. Another improvement is the fact that I now have a forward-facing off-road camera. This is a lifesaver because this new Grand Cherokee design has a really high hood. It is exceptionally difficult to see over the front of this vehicle when you're off-roading, especially when you're off-roading on this kind of terrain where there's hills and dips and things. This forward-facing camera, I don't even know if I could do some of these areas without it because there are boulders on the road, there are cacti on the road, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that you just can't see without this camera. One unfortunate thing about the clearance in the 4xe is that it is not as good as the clearance in the gas version of the Grand Cherokee. I've got about 10.9 inches of clearance in the Off-Road 2 setting. but the gas-powered version I believe has about 11.3 inches. So it's just a little bit more, it's a little less than a half an inch. Doesn't sound like much, but believe me, when you're off-roading on this kind of terrain, every little bit counts. And by the way, I am doing this whole drive in electric only mode, and it is wonderful. The only sound that I'm hearing is just a little bit of tire noise. There's some rattling of my water bottle and a few other things in the cabin. But other than that, I mean, it's really just silent. And it's such a great difference when you're out in nature, just being able to cruise around like this without hearing that big old V8 making so much noise. This little area that I'm coming up to here is probably the most tricky little part of this whole drive, and it doesn't look like much, but it just happens to be the area where I have hit almost every car I've ever taken up here, at least on occasion when I'm not careful. There's just a bit of a dip, and on the other side is granite, so if I'm not careful, I will scratch the front end of the car. So I always have to go, yeah, even the collision sensors don't like it, but we made it. All right, we are now on the granite dome. So an interesting thing about the granite dome here is that when I had my Lexus, I would absolutely just haul up this thing. As a matter of fact, the faster I went, the smoother the ride was. I mean, at worst, it just kind of felt like riding on a washboard road. My previous Jeep, the Overland, was horrible on this terrain. It just banged so hard, and it didn't matter which off-road setting I was in, if it was off-road 1 or off-road 2. It was really an unpleasant ride on this granite surface. It's a lot better in this new version. It's pretty smooth. This suspension is taking the hits reasonably nicely. I mean, yeah, I'm being tossed around a bit, but I'm not going to have my spine readjusted when I get back home. Well, I may not need to get my spine readjusted when I get home, but I am going to have to get a new tire. I clipped a rock on the way down the hill and it ripped the rubber, and I've now got metal showing. There is so much more that I could talk about in this car. I mean, I could easily have made this a 2-hour-long review if I'd gone into all the details about all the tech, all the safety features, all the intricacies of the hybrid system. But you know what? I really like this car. I think Jeep has done a fantastic job with it. As a matter of fact, there's not one single major issue that I have with it, not one. And that's really rare for me to say about a car. As a matter of fact, I think there's really only one moderate issue, and that's the sound of the 4-cylinder engine. Don't much care for how that thing sounds when it's revving very hard. But everything else, they're all just nitpicky little things that do not affect my overall opinion of the car. So, exterior styling, I'm going to give that a B+. I think it looks really good. I think it's an attractive looking SUV, but I also do not think that the average person would do a double take of it. The interior styling, however, that gets an A+ all day long. It is absolutely gorgeous in there. And it's not just form, it's also function. It's a very functional interior. I love it. And that's despite numerous little minor issues, like the gratuitous use of the piano black, like the fact that the instrument cluster is a bit of a cluttered mess, and the fact that, well, there's hardly any secure storage in the back of the SUV. Despite all that, the interior is so fantastic, it still gets an A+. As for how it drives, well, I'm going to give that an A. I love driving this car. I like driving this SUV more than any other non-performance SUV that I've ever driven. It really drives nicely. And like I say, it's not perfect. The 4-cylinder engine, when it revs hard, not a pleasant sound. And I do wish the seats were a little less firm. I would like them to have been a little bit more plush like my first Jeep. But otherwise, it really drives great. Tech and features. I'm going to give that an A as well. And the reason that I say that is, well, first of all, it should get an A+ for the sheer quantity of features and tech in this car. There's so much there, like I say, and so much that I did not have a chance to talk about. But not all the tech is spectacular. You've got the rear view mirror that isn't particularly useful, but then you've got things that truly are exceptional, like UConnect 5. Overall, I'm going to give The 2022 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe Summit, a very solid A. I love this car. I waited 10 months to get it. Absolutely worth the wait. Do not regret it for 1 second. And I would totally buy this again. There really is not any other SUV on the market right now that I would rather have at any price point. This checks more boxes for me than anything else out there. So anyway, that's my review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And as always, thanks for watching.